this lesson, we're looking at part 2 of Unit 5. We're going to talk about cellular transport. If you notice, I have a picture up here of a cell, and outside of that cell, I have a bunch of little dot molecules out here, and we could call these maybe glucose molecules. Well, we know that cells need glucose molecules, so cells have to find a way to get these little glucose molecules into the cell. So in this, we're going to talk about how cells would get molecules that are outside of the cell into the cell. How can we get things in? And the big thing to keep in mind is the cell membrane is selectively permeable. And that's an important term in biology. And selective, if you're selective, you pick one thing over another, right? So if you go to a grocery store and you're selective, you may pick one mango because of its juiciness, but you may leave out the unripe mango. And permeable, this term means able to pass through. So a doorway is permeable. I can pass through a doorway. So the cell membrane selectively decides what goes in and what goes out. So selectively permeable, here's a definition for you. Some molecules pass easily through the cell membrane while some are unable to pass through. And if we look at this picture here, just to make sense of this yellow thing here is the cell membrane. And we notice that there are lots of molecules here. Lots of molecules. Some of them, in our cell membrane, we notice we have pores or holes. Well, some molecules are small enough that they can easily just go through the cell membrane, while other things are far too large to pass through. So that's one of the main reasons why some things pass through and other things do not. Now, because of the chemistry of a cell membrane, there are plenty of other reasons. But that's a big part of selectively permeable. Now, we're going to talk about these big ideas of transport, or these main types, and there's two of them. We have passive transport, which is moving something through the membrane without using energy. And we have active transport, which is the cell needs to expand some energy to move a molecule across the membrane. So the key is this is energy. If it needs energy, it's active transport. If a cell can do it without using any energy, it's passive transport. So passive transport without energy, active transport with energy. We're going to look at just the rest of this unit. We're going to look at only passive transport. How can things get through that cell membrane without a cell expanding any energy? And we're going to talk about two types. So there are two ways in which molecules can move across a membrane without energy. And the first way, so here's number one. Number one is diffusion. Now if you think about this, if I take a beaker of water, and here's my beaker of water, and I put a whole bunch of drops of red food coloring in that beaker of water, and then I let that sit for like 10 minutes, eventually what I'm going to notice is that the entire beaker is going to be equally red. So the entire beaker will be red throughout. What that means is these molecules that I had in a high concentration over here moved from this area of high concentration and they spread out so that they are all equally concentrated in a solution. That's this idea of diffusion. So all molecules want to move from an area of high concentration here to an area of low concentration. They want to get down here where there's no other molecules. Because of that, they move until they spread out completely. Okay, we give these some confusing terms. We call this the concentration gradient. And the concentration gradient is like the current or flow of molecules. So if you think about this, the best way to think about this is a rushing river. If I am going downstream, and I believe this is downstream, if I'm going downstream, I don't really have to paddle very hard. The current or the flow of water carries me. So that's, So that's what we call going down the concentration gradient, is you're going with the flow of the river, and you don't have to use any energy. But if I'm to turn my canoe around and I wanted to go upstream, I'm going to have to paddle really hard to go against the flow of the river. So this paddling is against the river, or what we call against the concentration gradient, and doing that requires energy. So if we move molecules where they naturally want to go with the stream, we don't have to spend any energy. But if we want to move a molecule against the stream where they don't naturally want to go, we have to expand some energy. That's going to be active transport. So in diffusion, the molecules naturally want to spread out. So we don't have to spend any energy. They naturally want to go with this concentration gradient from area of high concentration to an area of low until they're all spread out. Okay, so down the concentration gradient is from high to low, and up is from low to high, where molecules don't want to go. So if we move, if I have a whole bunch of molecules on this side of the membrane, right, a whole bunch of molecules on this side of the membrane, and here's my membrane, and I have very few molecules over here. Molecules naturally want to spread out. They want to go from an area of high concentration to low. So to get molecules to move this way, this is down the concentration gradient, and this doesn't require any energy. Now if we wanted to move these few molecules back this way, they don't naturally want to do that, so we'd have to spend energy. So this is down the concentration gradient, this is up the concentration gradient. This thing where they move from high concentration to low is called diffusion. Okay? There's one other type of diffusion, or another type of passive transport, and this is facilitated transport. So this is diffusion, but it needs some help. That's what facilitated means, like requires help. So this is diffusion that requires some help. So this is where we move objects across the membrane, and we use a protein to help out, and it's called a carrier protein. It still doesn't require any use of energy, so we still move things without energy, but it requires this protein to get across. Okay, it does not require energy, and it moves molecules down the concentration gradient, so they naturally still want to go there. I'm going to back up just a little bit. If you think about this, so we talked about that cell membrane, and here's our cell membrane, and there's a lot of things that don't want to move across, like ions. If we have charged particles, charged atoms called ions, they don't naturally want to move. They can't go through the cell membrane because they're repelled by the lipid tails. But if you look at this, I have a whole bunch of ions on this side of the membrane and very few ions on this side. These ions naturally want to go here. They're really trying to get across that cell membrane. The problem is they can't go through it. So even though they naturally really want to go through it, they can't. So what we're going to use is we're going to use a carrier protein here to help carry them across that cell membrane because it's essentially blocking them. So if we look at this, here's our carrier protein down here. And if we notice, the molecule floats into the carrier protein. The carrier protein changes its shape. So notice here how the shape is different from this one. So the carrier protein changes its shape and spits it out on the other side. Now these are moving with the concentration gradient. They still naturally want to go across there, but they need this protein to change shape and help move it across. So that's facilitated transport. It's diffusion using a carrier protein. All right, if you have any questions about these two concepts, we'll look at them in lab with a big lab here coming up. But yeah, if you have any questions about this, feel free to ask me. Thanks, class.